for the Toronto District School Board. I'm also the representative for Ontario Parents of Visually Impaired Children. And to my right is
Richard Carter, representing the Down Syndrome Association of Toronto and the Vice Chair of SEAC.
We're going to just, we're streaming live. We'll just go around the room for the benefit of everybody online to know who's in the room. We won't introduce everybody online. You'll be introduced as you're speaking or contributing. But if we could just start perhaps on my left, and if SEAC members could introduce themselves, and then if staff could, that would be great.
So I'll start. Leanne Dixon, I'm the SEAC liaison.
I'm Leo, Autism Ontario representative.
Elizabeth Schaefer, staff.
Effie Stathopoulos, staff.
Good evening, Nandy Palmer is Systems Superintendent for Special Education and Inclusion.
Nora Green, Inclusion Action in Ontario.
And that's everyone?
That is everybody in the
That's
room.
everybody live. Greeting to everybody. We are coming to you live from beautiful uptown Toronto. Let's dive into our agenda. First, we'll have our land acknowledgement, which our Vice Chair, Richard, will provide.
Okay, for anybody that is available to stand and able to, please do so. We acknowledge we reside on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, as well as the importance of establishing and maintaining cultural safety through learning from Indigenous peoples and perspectives. Thank you.
All right. Moving into approving the agenda, I've had a request by email that we discuss the issue of proposed TDSB directive or policy or procedure for community advisory committees, including the Special Education Advisory Committee. I'm going to put that on the agenda just before other business. And just to give everyone a heads up, I think I've got a way that's going to satisfactorily address the concerns in a time-efficient kind of way. So with that, could we get a motion from someone to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve from Nora Green. We have a seconder. Looking at hands on the screen. Oh, sorry. Leo, seconded.
Our two people, SEAC members in the room, are going to be doing yeoman service and moving and seconding
And
things.
I should ask, all in favor? No objections? Motion passed.
All right. Conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare in relation to the issues, any of the issues on our agenda? If you do, could you please signify? Anybody signifying?
No conflicts of interest identified by anybody.
All right. Next, the minutes have been circulated. Some revisions were made at the request of Jean-Paul and were incorporated. So I'm just wondering if we could have a motion. Well, let's get the motion to approve the minutes on the table first.
With the amendments?
Yeah, as amended.
Motion to approve the minutes as amended. Nora, do we have a seconder? Tracy O'Regan online.
Great. Anybody have anything they want to change, or are you content with the minutes proceeding as is? And just for future reference, I want to particularly thank JP for sending in his concerns in advance. That enables us to get through this part of the meeting quickly. Anybody else have any concerns? None were communicated in advance of the meeting. Or can we call the motion?
All in favor? If no objections seen, no objections seen, motion carried.
Okay, I'm now going to take just a couple of minutes for a chair's report to you. I just want to thank everybody for the feedback I've gotten since our last meeting and the feedback on how you'd like to see things go at SEAC. And as a result of it, I've just got a few thoughts I want to share. These are just musings, none require any votes. And they're just reflections of how I'm proposing to approach my role with you. My goal, as I see it, is in part as an air traffic controller, because we all have different issues we want to deal with, and staff have issues they want to raise, and I want to make best use of all of your time as volunteers, focusing our efforts as much as possible on the things that will actually bring the biggest benefit to our kids. And to that end, I'm going to be doing my best, as I said when I spoke before, when we were choosing our chair. I'm going to do my best to focus on substantive issues, not SEAC procedural stuff. SEAC procedural stuff, if it comes up, I want to find ways to address concerns, but to do it either offline, not using our scarce minutes together here at this meeting, or any other way I can make things efficient for you. How am I going to come up with agendas? Just a few thoughts. One is, and a major part is, getting your feedback today on what your priorities are. And that's going to be coming up on our meeting agenda. I'm also assisted by the fact that a number of you gave feedback last fall in writing of what your priorities were. I've read those. They've been provided to both Richard and me, and happy to share to anybody who wants to see them. And of course, having been on SEAC since 2015 and seeing how things go, I'm going to take all of that information and try to craft agendas for our meetings, which are not too crammed, which have a shorter number of major issues, but ones that we can then spend good time on and drill down right into them. To that end, just a couple of tips. And of course, if anything is breaking news, something comes up, nothing's going to be carved in stone. I'm not intending to sort of decide there's a list of 5 priorities and that's it for the year, and if something else comes up, too bad. This is all flexible. This is extremely flexible. But the other thing I want to tell you about that's going to help you and help staff. Staff have limited time. We want to use their time most effectively. And you, as SEAC members, are volunteers and you have limited time. I want to use that time most effectively. Here's a suggestion that's going to help. Occasionally, members of SEAC have written me, and will write, and say, can we put X on the agenda? And what I'm going to do regularly or routinely is when I look at these, is the first thing is I'm going to say is, if you're trying to find something out from staff, could you please write Leanne, set out what your question is, she will refer it to the appropriate staff. If they get back and it solves your question, you don't need to ask it again. You don't need to take up SEAC meeting time with it. If you get an answer back you're not happy with and you follow up and it's still not resolved, bring it back to me, and this could be in the space of just a couple of days, or it may take longer, then we'll work on trying to fit it into the agenda. If there's a problem with a practice, there's something going on and you want to say, hey board, why aren't you doing it differently? Again, don't wait for a SEAC meeting for it. Write Leanne with it. You're more than welcome to copy me, but Leanne will forward it to me. Let her refer it to the appropriate staff. If they come back with a solution like, hey, that was a good idea, we'll do it, or hey, we're studying it, and that resolves it for you, again, we don't need to take up SEAC meeting time, but if you get an answer back that you're not happy with and you think it's something we should be allocating time on, then it's right for us to consider. This is not meant to make things harder for you. This is meant to enable us to cover more things more quickly. And finally, the advantage of all of this, if we ask staff questions kind of extemporaneously at a meeting like this, and I've done that, we all do. Staff may well know the answer, but on the other hand, they may not. It's a big school board, a lot of issues. If they don't, their response is going to be, can we get back to you? And that's fair. But if you write them in advance to raise your question in advance of a meeting so that they could try to get back to you in advance of the meeting or when they can, that gives them a fair opportunity to respond. So that's kind of the overall way I'm going to try to do the air traffic control role, with a view to us covering as much ground as we can for as many of you as I can. Will I make mistakes? Absolutely. If I do, please let me know. Final part of my chair's report, just something I mentioned last meeting. This is a busy job I've taken on. It's a volunteer role. It's one of many. So if you're trying to reach me between meetings, send me an email. I will try to get back to you. I invariably will miss some. And if I do, and I have, I apologize. I'll do my best. And if I haven't gotten back to you in a couple of weeks and it's something, feel free to nudge, elbow, cajole, that's fine. But please use email because life's a bit hectic. With all of that, I'd like to move into our next agenda item. And if you have feedback on anything I've just said today, just flip me an email. Like it, you don't like it, alternative suggestion. I'm all ears. Next on our agenda, one thing about time limits for speaking. We're not going to have a fixed rule for the whole meeting. I'm going to be looking at each agenda item and saying, hey, we got a lot of things ahead. I may say, can you keep it to a minute? Hey, this is a big thing and we've got more time than we thought. Let's do 3 minutes a person. I'm not going to be rigid, but I want to keep things moving because as with today, we got a lot we want to cover and we've added a new thing on the agenda just now. And I want to get people out of here at 9 o'clock if I can. So next item.
David, sorry,
Yes.
John Paul does have his hand up.
Oh, sure.
Okay, thank you, David. And the question I have is, I have two questions, please. What do you put into procedural stuff? Can you give some example? And the second one, I think I've been around long enough, and how would you and Richard would ensure that we don't, we build on, we take the meetings as building block, not be all the time reinventing the wheel.
I'm going to ask you to just say the speakers in here are not great, so I'm going to ask you if you just restate the last sentence. And if we could turn the volume up, that would help.
The last sentence is that how would you ensure that we take all the meetings as a building block, follow up on some of the decisions that we make, going forward, without, finding ourselves all the time reinventing the wheel?
I don't have any categorical answers for you on either. We'll just take these as they happen. And that's the best. I can't give you kind of broad answers. But if you have suggestions at any point, flip me an email.
No, I think Richard, Richard and David, I think that is, it was actually, to make sure that we keep track of some of the decisions that we make, that we brought up the idea of action lock.
Yeah, no, and it's a good idea, Jean Paul.
Yeah.
I've talked to staff about how we'll, how best to carry forward with that. As of now, I was advised that there was nothing on it that was active, and it's a good idea. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you about how to do this to make it work the best. But it's the point that we want to keep track, that we don't want to just sort of raise things and have them vanish, is a perfectly good one, and I agree.
Sorry, I think that is last. I'm a little bit surprised when they say that there's nothing active there, when we know that we have some follow-ups on some of the motion that we presented to the board. Anyway, sorry, Jay.
Okay, let's follow up on this, and let's put that on the action log. Our next agenda, thank you, JP, and our next agenda item is going to be to hear from the board legal counsel on a proposed new process for IPRC appeals. For the benefit of the public watching this, I'm going to give a little bit of an understanding of what I understand we're being asked, and I want to ask our presenters when they introduce themselves, if they could answer a question up front that would help us understand this. A person, a child, a student may, or their family may go before a committee at the board called the Identification and Placement Review Committee, or IPRC. It decides on the child's identification, formally identifying whether they have a condition that falls within the definition of students who can receive special education. And then it decides on where the placement of the child within the different categories of programs at the board. If the family is happy, if they go before an IPRC, if they're happy with the outcome, it proceeds. If they're not happy, then under the provincial regulations, they could file an appeal. It is the board won't say this, I will, a ridiculously complicated process. The first appeal is to something called the Special Education Appeal Board, or SEAB. The SEAB can make a recommendation. They can say, hey, we think the IPRC was right, or we think it was wrong. The board doesn't have to follow that recommendation. If they don't, and if the family wants to appeal further, they can appeal to the Special Education Tribunal. That's the second layer of appeal. If they're not happy with that, then they go to court. Now, the question for the benefit of everybody, that the staff want to raise with us relates to the first level of appeal, the appeal from the IPRC to this thing called the Special Education Appeal Board, a body which can make recommendations but can't direct TDSB what to do. And the question I understand that the staff are going to be asking us is, after that board, the Special Education Appeal Board, makes a recommendation to the TDSB, who at TDSB decides whether to follow the Special Education Appeal Board's recommendation? And the staff are considering the options of either the whole Board of Trustees, all the elected politicians will collectively decide, or a group of staff. And what I want to lead when the staff begin right now with a question that we really need answered to listen to you is this. The presentation that was sent to us said that the regulations, the provincial regulations that create this appeal, are unclear on who is supposed to make that decision, whether it's the trustees or the staff. We, of course, can't give legal advice to staff on which interpretation they should adopt. If the legal department says it must be the trustees, then it doesn't matter whether we think that's good or bad. That's what the legal advice is. So we need to know what actually you're asking us. Is it the position of the board legal counsel that the board has the choice between the trustees or staff, and you want our policy advice over what would be better? Or are you saying you actually have no idea, it's so ambiguous that you don't know which interpretation, whether even the board has that choice or not? So we need to know the answer to that so we know what we're giving you advice on. So with that, over to staff.
Thank you, David. Good evening. So we have today a presentation by a number of TDSB staff members. And I'm going to introduce really quickly Krish Chakraborty. Next slide, please, Leanne. Krish is from our legal department. And we also have Vitaly Platnikov, who is from our policy department, and Associate Director Luis Risco. And I will be joining the presentation. And we will go to the next slide, please. Krish?
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Palmer. So the purpose of tonight's discussion, we're asking SEAC to provide their thoughts on the new recommended procedure for making decisions on recommendations made by the Special Education Board, or SEAB, when a parent appeals an IPRC decision. So the considerations are as follows. So SEAB can make recommendations to the board, but not binding decisions. School boards are not required to follow the recommendations of the SEAB. They can either accept the recommendations, they can reject the recommendations, and they can make their own decision surrounding the recommendations of SEAB. Parents, guardians, and caregivers can still appeal the IPRC decision after the step if they disagree with the board's decision to the Ontario Special Education Tribunal, or OSET. Next slide, please. So just a bit of the legislative background surrounding IPRCs and the appeal process. So Regulation 181/98 is the regulation that governs the IPRC appeal process for identification and placement of exceptional pupils. The IPRC is established to determine the identification and placement of exceptional pupils at the onset by the committee. And then Reg 181/98 sets out the appeal process if they disagree with the IPRC decision. If the parents agree with the IPRC decision, then everything's fine, everybody goes home, the student is identified, and they're placed in accordance with the IPRC decision. However, if the parent disagrees with the IPRC decision, then they have the appeal route to the Special Education Appeal Board. At that point in time, what happens is the parents select a SEAB nominee, the TDSB selects a SEAB nominee, and then the two nominees get together and they select a chair, thereby making a 3-panel member of SEAB. I see. If we could just go back to the slide. Sorry, I just want to finish my thought on this before we go on to the procedure step. Thank you. So part of the legislation, which is unclear, is not this particular point because this is legislatively mandated as to what the composition of the SEAB has. What happens at SEAB is a hearing is conducted where SEAB hears from both sides, and then they make a particular recommendation with respect to identification and placement. At that point in time, once that recommendation is made, it is up to, as Regulation 181/98 says, the board to determine what the recommendations will be, whether to implement them or not implement them, and implement some other identification or placement. It is this piece of the legislation under 181/98 which is unclear. 181/98 says the board is to determine the SEAB recommendations, and I'm paraphrasing. And it is very ambiguous and very unclear as to who the board really is. Is the board the entire board of trustees? Or is the board TDSB staff? Board is not sufficiently defined in the Education Act in order for us to make that determination. And further, there is no case law or common law on this particular point that may shed some light on what board actually means. If we actually canvass other school boards, we see that they all do different kinds of things. And they're also not clear as to what board actually means. And we're going to go and take a look at that a little later on in this presentation. So if I could get the next slide, please. And what we're going to talk about on this slide is the actual IPRC procedure, which I've kind of provided an overview of. So the IPRC is convened in step 1. If the parent disagrees, they can either request an IPRC reconvene, which is the first step we always take when a parent disagrees, or they can file a notice of appeal with TDSB. And this is the appeal to the Special Education Appeal Board, or SEAB. If the parent does file a notice of appeal, the TDSB will convene a SEAB to hear the appeal, Within 15 days, TDSB and CIAB will pick one nominee each, and then they will select a third member to be the chair of the CIAB. And within 30 days of being selected, the chair will arrange for that CIAB hearing to take place. Step four.
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. I'm just mindful of the time because we've got a lot of other things we're going to be talking about tonight. And all of the procedures don't really matter. The real question that you're asking, that you're struggling with, is when the regulation says the board will decide whether to implement the recommendations of the Special Education Appeal Board. Does the board mean the school board trustees or school board staff? And my question to you, I mean, all this other stuff doesn't matter, the internal procedures or whatever, is if it's legally ambiguous, which is what you're saying it is, there's no case law. My question to you is this. The Education Act uses the word board in all sorts of different contexts, I assume. The regulations under the Education Act uses the word board in all sorts of different contexts. Can you tell us whether in all the other contexts they mean the trustees, or whether sometimes it means the trustees and sometimes it's delegated to staff?
Thank you for the question. And so I will start off by saying that it really depends on the wording of the legislation. In this particular instance, 181/98, it is ambiguous and it is unclear as to whether it is the Board of Trustees or which is staff. And that is the specific reason why we're developing this procedure.
If I may, Krish, through the chair to the committee, Chair Leposki, if we could ask for your indulgence just to finish the procedure. We, the last time that we presented this, there was some confusion in regards to the procedure. So it's not terribly long, but I think it's important that we do go through all of the slides if that's all right.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I will speed it up a little bit. So within 30 days of CIAB's report, which is to be delivered in 3 days, TDSB will deliver what action it's going to take. And under this draft procedure, we are recommending a TDSB staff committee. Parents may accept the TDSB's decision, or in the case of disagreement, they can appeal the decision further to the Ontario Special Education Tribunal within 30 days. Next slide, please.
Yeah, next slide. Leanne?
So just a bit of a background, IPRC appeals in the TDSB are very, very rare. We're talking about less than one appeal per year. In the last 5 years, we've had only 2 IPRC appeals, and they both involve the exact same students, so there's other considerations going on. The basis of those appeals were the provision of programs and services. Again, programs and services are not determined at the IPRC level, they're determined at the school level. The sole purpose of the IPRC is identification and placement. That is it. In those cases, TDSB rejected the recommendations of CIAB because they did not have jurisdiction to talk about programs and services, but instead only identification and placement. Both IPRC appeals were appealed to the Ontario Special Education Tribunal, and both of them were dismissed as having no merit because OSET did not have jurisdiction to determine programs and services. Next slide, please. So historically at TDSB, the entire Board of Trustees had the final decision-making authority on the recommendations of CIAB. During the last IPRC appeal process, the Board of Trustees expressed their discomfort with the process, given a lack of expertise and understanding around the legislative framework that is IPRC appeals. So the following challenges were posed. You needed specialized knowledge and subject matter expertise in special education and governing legislation, risk of personal student identification being widely disseminated to the Board of Trustees. Appeals are quite rare, less than 1 a year, and the decisions could result in significant financial consequences for the board in the provision of specific placements. Next slide, please. So practices in other Ontario school boards. So there's no consistent practice across the school boards in our scan. In some smaller school boards, the director had the decision-making authority. In other school boards, it was one staff member had authority. In other school boards smaller than TDSB, the entire board of trustees has authority. Some school boards have never gone through the CIAB process, given the rarity of IPRC appeals. Next slide, please. So, given that framework, our recommendations are as follows. Due to the unclear legislative intent as to decision-making authority and rationale for staff with specialized expertise to determine IPRC appeals, we recommend delegating decision-making authority of IPRC appeals to TDSB Staff Committee. TDSB Staff Committee will comprise the System Superintendent of Special Education, given their expertise in the matter, the Superintendent of the Learning Network of the student, because that is their portfolio, it is their learning network, and an Associate Director or Executive Superintendent of a different learning network or designate to provide that impartiality in the decision-making process, not being in that particular learning network. Parents still have the option of appealing that decision to the Ontario Special Education Tribunal. Next slide, please, and we're almost at the end here. So we presented this recommendation in the report to the draft procedure to GPC for feedback. And some feedback was as follows. The trustees recognizes the challenges of appeal processes as they currently exist. They supported the need for specialized knowledge through special education inclusion staff. They expressed a concern to maintain impartiality. They suggested that they clarify language around staff representative from another learning center having no prior knowledge of the case. They also suggested including a trustee. Next slide, please. Next steps. We're seeking GPC approval. Will be provided a subsequent GPC meeting. The report will include a recommended action for the board to delegate authority to TDSB Staff Committee to make decisions related to special education appeals. It is expected that the special education identification, placement, and appeal operational procedure will come into effect as of September 2020. At this point in time, we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'm going to start, and then we've
We
got,
have Trustee Arts and then Michelle.
okay, so me, then Michelle, and then Richard. Let me begin by saying
Trustee Shakeli from the list here.
that I don't share your view that the wording is ambiguous. I think the word says the board. Quite deliberately, it means the board, and the board can't delegate it unless it's got statutory authority to delegate it to staff. So I think you're actually looking at getting yourselves into legal peril. I'm not here to be providing free legal advice to the board. I'm just telling you what I think. I'm also going to say that supporting my view it's not ambiguous is the fact, if you look at section 265 1M of the Education Act, which is a section we've all had to live with because it deals with refusals to admit, it provides that an appeal from the refusal to admit is to the board, as I recall, and that means the board. It shouldn't be subdelegated below that because of political oversight, or pardon me, for whatever reason. And if I'm right, and this is why the wording may be ambiguous, but principles of statutory interpretation are there to fill ambiguity. There's lots of ambiguous words in legislation. And if I'm right, then all of your policy reasons why it would be better to staff to do it may be good policy arguments, but they don't displace the law. So I would need to know more than I do know to be persuaded otherwise, but that's just me. Others may feel completely differently. Trustee Arts, Michelle.
Thank you. I just would also say to this presentation, when the two cases came before the board, it wasn't just that kind of a lack of expertise. It was that when you looked at what the legislation is, not just what the ambiguities, but what an IPRC is supposed to determine, what was being asked for in the CIAB recommendation, were not aligned. So we were supposed to make a ruling on an appeal to an IPRC, and what the recommendation was actually bringing forward was something as was stated was in both cases was we want these resources. It wasn't about the IPRC. So there was, when it got to the board, it felt like, honestly, the cases felt like, well, we can't do anything except say no because they're not aligned. Like it was we're not here to make we're not here to decide on what sort of resources in the classroom the student gets. That comes afterwards. The appeal is about the placement, and the IPRC itself, and the IPRC have been done. So the overall process. I don't know that the overall process works very well, and I would say if my other comment on the review of the procedure, I do think that the board needs a clearer procedure on this. I would say if a trustee is going to be on a panel or a committee, I would also ask for the kind of mandatory training that we have for other statutory committee pieces like discipline hearings and SAL committees. So before we can sit on discipline hearings, we actually have to go through training on the legislation and the needs and the caring and safe policies. And I would say I wouldn't just stick anybody on this committee without first training them. So,
all right, thanks.
Okay, so thank you, David. After myself, I have Nora, Melissa, and then Isabella.
And I'm gonna say 2 minutes each if we can, as best you can.
Okay. Mine's very quick, very brief. I understand that the authority of CIAB or their mandate is to look at the ID and the exceptionality of the student. Basically, those are the only two things. Is that correct? Did I have that correct, that the mandate are just to look at those two items? So my question would be, who within the board has the greatest expertise and knowledge of the two areas where a decision is being asked of? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, I can begin. So that is correct. The entire IPRC appeal process from IPRC to the Special Education Appeal Board level to the Ontario Special Education Tribunal level only looks at two things: the identification of the student and the placement of the student. And with respect to the second question, it is, in our respectful view, TDSB staff, that is specifically the TDSB Special Education Department, as well as the Superintendent of Education and the principal of the school, would be in the best position to provide advice and guidance and knowledge on the identification and the appeal process, because they are directly linked to the child who is the subject of that IPRC. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora next. Nora?
Thanks. So I guess number one, did we get a copy of the actual draft procedure at one point? That would be my first question, but I've got just sort of two comments, so maybe somebody can answer that question after. My first comment is I find it frustrating that people disassociate placement and program, and I understand that's how you feel or interpret the law. But the reality is, if somebody's saying a special education class is an appropriate placement, it must be because the program is not possible in a regular class. So somehow there is this intersection between special education program and placement delivery. To segregate them and act as though they are distinct things is not realistic. Because if it wasn't true, any placement could have any kind of a program, right? So what you're clearly saying in a placement is we can only offer this program in this kind of environment. So I disagree with the statement that placement and program are not connected. And then I think secondly, my other comment is that I don't think it's a problem that the trustees should be informed about what special education programs and services look like. I think when you're ultimately responsible for the duty to accommodate our students, You should be educated in what services and programs are offered. And to say the staff have to sort of scurry around to take care of that for and on behalf of people is not really appropriate. So safe and caring schools, I would argue that there is a lot of safety and care that is due to our students, and to even have a department that's separate and there's training for that, but not about special education trustees, is very problematic for me. So I would certainly say I think the trustees should be involved, as ultimately they're really on the hook for making sure the kids are all accommodated for, are they not? So that would be my feeling. And just if you could answer the question about, did we get the full procedure or just a slide deck? Because I only saw the slide deck this time, so I may have missed something, I'm sorry.
Hey, Nora, thank you. Richard's just going to read out the list of the other speakers, and then we're going to limit the list to these folks.
Wait, David,
The
I didn't know
remaining-
if we got the full procedure. Is that okay? Did we?
Yeah, could we get it, please?
So the remaining speakers are Melissa, Isabella, Leo, and Trustee Zakur. Each one has 2 minutes. Go ahead, please, Melissa. We can't hear you, Melissa.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've actually, for some strange reason, over the last decade, been asked to sit on a handful of CABs across the province. I've never advised a parent to do it, but after it's in place, people have asked me for emotional support or to take notes. I've also, through those, heard of other CABs. So I have quite a bit of feedback on it that kind of levies or springboards off what Michelle was saying, that there's a lot of broader issues here than just the identification and placement. And I think bottom line, a lot of parents are so concerned about the delivery of education to their students that they end up in a CAB when there could probably be more effective ways of addressing their concerns. Some of the concerns parents have is that school boards in a CAB, which can often last a full day, often retain outside counsel to the tune of $10,000 or $20,000 per CAB. Parents never have counsel, and they feel that they are run around. So I don't want to go into detail on all this. I'll just say that there are concerns, and if you're asking for feedback on it, perhaps we could provide some offline to look at this a little bit more broadly. On the specific question, though, which David was trying to narrow down, I do believe that is actually the question that you're asking. And I fully, maybe it's the lawyer thing for both of us, but I fully agree with David that I don't think it's ambiguous. I think that the word board
30 seconds.
in many other instances always means trustees. And so this seems like a little bit of a misplaced question. I do think there's opportunities for improving the process for students, the board, financially, better outcomes, everything like that, but it probably needs a broader
10
discussion
seconds.
and broader questions. And I thought the trustees' suggestions were a good place to start building on one of your slides.
Thank you, Melissa.
If anyone wants to discuss with me further, I'm always open to discussion.
Okay, so the next one on the list is Isabella, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could, can I respond to the other two comments first, just so we can keep everything clear and in line?
Please go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just to respond to the initial question. So a couple of things. Firstly, because we do feel that it's ambiguous, whether you believe that it's ambiguous or not ambiguous, what we're asking here for is a delegation of authority from the Board of Trustees to TDSB staff in order to make the decision. The fact of the matter is TDSB as a board and TDSB Legal Services is not clear as to whether whose decision it is. But in the case that it's completely clear that it is the Board of Trustees, that's fine. We're still asking that the authority be delegated strictly out of an abundance of caution to TDSB staff to make the decision, because they are in the best place and has the best knowledge and expertise in the matter to be able to make the decision. So whether we're right or wrong on the Board of Trustee issue as to who actually has the authority to make the decision, we are nevertheless asking that the board delegate the authority strictly out of an abundance of caution in case it is unclear. That's number one. Number two, we have examples of several other boards who are doing this exact same thing. As per our slide deck in our previous submissions, we have boards who have just put the Director of Education in charge of the CAB decision. We have other boards who have actually put a panel of board staff who make the decision. We have yet other school boards who just has a manager of student services who makes the decision. So if we are wrong on this, then there's several other boards who are also not complying with their legal obligations. So in our respectful submission, we do feel that it's ambiguous. And even if you feel that it's not ambiguous, we are asking for the delegation of authority in case board really does mean Board of Trustees. And again, we're not talking about 265 sub 1 sub M, and we are not talking about other iterations or provisions in the Education Act. We are talking specifically about Regulation 181/98 as it concerns IPRC.
I'm intervening because we're actually beyond the time for this agenda item. I want to make sure you get to hear feedback from the other members of SEAC who wanted to share their views.
I do, but I also want to respond to the feedback so we're exactly clear on what we're doing. I do want to respond to the previous question as well, to be very, very clear as to the separation of the programs versus the placement. We are not delineating programs from the placement as a general sense. It is Regulation 181/98 in the IPRC appeal process which delineates programs from placement. We know that placement and programs are intertwined. If you have a particular placement, of course, you're going to have certain programs and services within that placement. They're completely intertwined. We understand that. However, that occurs at the school level.
I'm sorry, I'm going to intervene
at the appeal process.
I'm going to
The
intervene
reason
again.
why I was delineating the matter, I'm almost done. The reason why I was delineating the matter is because the legislation delineates it in the case.
Can I intervene, because as chair of the meeting, I'd like to make sure that the purpose for which you came here, which is to hear from us, is fulfilled. If you don't share the feedback or don't agree with it, you're of course welcome to do that, but we're here to give advice, and that's what I'd want to make sure we can do. So if our last members of SEAC who would like to contribute could, without interruption, offer their feedback, that would be great.
Isabella, please go ahead.
Thank you. I actually wanted to re-emphasize what Nora mentioned, but from a slightly different scenario, and that has to do with placement and access to services. I'm somebody who also has a child with complex special needs who just this year went through IPRC, and I must admit that this was actually quite an intimidating process, even for me and my partner. And I would say both of us can communicate perfectly in English. I could imagine that if you have a child that has complex special needs, and if that child is placed at, at the school that doesn't have the supports, that parents obviously would want to do an appeal. I mean, this goes without saying. And to me, separating the two is doesn't make any sense. So, and just to say the child is placed at a school, and then based on the discretion of the principal, the services will be provided. Well, if the child is placed at a school that doesn't have the resources, how are they supposed to provide that?
30 seconds remaining.
That's the only thing I wanted to say, and just simply because I am speaking for those who actually are on the other end of the disability spectrum, and these students require a lot of support, and we understand it's expensive, but it's also the right of these students to have access to education. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Leo?
Thank you. Primarily, I agree in principle with the proposal to delegate the authority to special education staff instead of trustees. But nevertheless, I think there are some issues that have to be resolved in parallel, because honestly, the fact that you only had one appeal per year for such a big school board is actually symptomatic. An alarming number of parents we speak to at Autism Ontario are actually unaware that they have the right to appeal IPRC decisions. And that's a fundamental oversight that shifts the power dynamics within the panel, often making the process feel less collaborative and more prescriptive, which is what we hear as well. The perceived imbalance can hinder the creation of optimal educational experiences for students who thrive when their educational pathways are built on a foundation of partnership and mutual understanding. Autism Ontario recognizes the IPRC as the existing avenue for identification and placement, but we must acknowledge that the current state is opaque, unnecessarily bureaucratic, and daunting for many parents. This complexity not only sidelines parents from actively participating in crucial decisions about their child's placement and programming, but also obscures their understanding of their rights within the process. Therefore, we advocate for the importance of starting all IPRC meetings with a clear, concise explanation of parents' rights, including their right to appeal. It is imperative that you encourage collaborative approach among parents, service providers, and educators through this process, thereby ensuring that it serves as a constructive tool for developing tailored educational strategies that truly benefit students. We speak to other boards, and the difference between how other boards tackle IPRCs versus the TDSB is very, very different.
30 seconds.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, Chair. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. And Trustee Zakur is our final speaker as we had to cut it off. Trustee Zakur?
Thank you, Chair. To you, Mr. Chair, I want to ask Mr. Chris, the definition of board, does it change only for IPRC or it's all across the board? I need to hear this answer, Chair.
Thank you for the question. It is unclear. The board is used in different ways in different contexts throughout the Education Act and all of its regulations. It is a very, very large act. There are numerous regulations, and the board is used in different ways and sometimes unclear ways as per this particular case as well. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
As a trustee, I feel offended today when I heard from Chris that trustees should not be part of this process because they don't carry the expertise. I take really offensive that remark, thinking that all the 22 trustees come with various set of skills, knowledge, community involvement, and community needs. If this statement is saying that a trustee cannot sit on a special education hearing and they do not have a knowledge of such subject, then I really want to see that all those trustees, since this board was made up, what sort of skills, knowledge in the particular field or the committee they sat on brought in. So I really found this offensive as a trustee of the board when I hear this statement, that they don't carry that skill set to bring at this hearing. I'm not a part of PPC, I'm not part of GPC, but for sure I will raise this issue and concern. And the statement shared by Chris was very offensive to me and probably my fellow trustees. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. For everybody's benefit, if anybody else has feedback or if you wanted to chime in for more, please send your feedback in writing to Leanne and she will forward it on. I want to thank legal counsel for coming and I hope you found our feedback useful. I will conclude by simply saying that the IPRC is itself appointed by the board at the staff level. One of the 3 members of the Special Education Appeal Board is appointed by staff, and the other, one of the other 2 is the chair, who is co-appointed by the staff rep, so that at least in evaluating which option you want to go through, if you indeed have a legal choice, which is still unclear to me, at least you should think about also the need for independent oversight of staff who have been intimately involved with each step. And considering whether the legislature or the cabinet meant that there be some oversight above that, and thereby referring to the board. Thank you very much, and let's move to, and we do have a request.
Sorry, David.
Yeah.
Associate Director Sarisco does have her hand up, just to conclude the presentation.
Okay, Louise, if we could do it briefly, because we want to get to the budget presentation.
Understood, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. I want to take this opportunity to close this presentation just to clarify a matter. I really don't want anybody here this evening to walk away upset from our consultation. So through you, Chair, to Trustee Patel, and I know that there is a chat posting also saying that this does not feel like a comfortable conversation. Our intention from staff to you is to be very, very transparent. This presentation actually was born from conversations with trustees during the last CABs who were not feeling comfortable with their level of in-depth knowledge about the Education Act in regards to special education. And so staff had a duty to analyze how CABs function and to bring our best thinking to the committee. It was trustees themselves who articulated that they did not feel that they had the knowledge. The Act is very long, the regulations are as well. So I just wanted to clarify that staff and our legal presence today through Krish did not articulate that trustees did not have the expertise. It was trustees themselves who expressed that. So to Trustee Patel, I hope that that clarifies. It was certainly not our intention to be.
No, we've got the point. That's good.
Okay. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you for clearing that up. I'm mindful of time. I'm not trying to be rude to anybody. But we have Craig Snyder here who wanted 15 minutes to address the budget, and I want to make sure we get a chance to do that now. So, Mr. Snyder, ready to go?
I'm ready to go, and thank you for having me again tonight. I just need a couple of seconds to wrestle the technology. There we go. Start from the beginning. That should do it. So good evening, everybody. I just want to take this opportunity again to come and speak with you this evening about the budget. So without further ado, I'll move right into my presentation. There we go. So tonight, I'd like to give you an update on the budget. I want to talk about February 14th, potential areas for focus to balance the budget. That's in front of the FBAC committee. I want to talk about some of the things we're considering and have to take into account as we consider areas to focus to balance the budget. There has been a change to the budget schedule, so I'd like to update you on that. And of course, I'll take the opportunity to answer any questions the committee may have. So I met with the SEAC Budget Committee on February 6th, and we had a fulsome discussion around the budget. And the consensus, I think, at the end of the meeting is that they're requesting that we put the operating budget in a program outline. So what we're going to do, staff, is we're going to prepare for the March 18th SEAC to bring back the revised estimates for this year in a program delineated format for you. We hope that helps better serve the SEAC committee to understand the cost per program, and we'll work with our colleagues in special education to provide that for you. So that took place on February 6th, earlier this week, I think. So there's areas of focus. So this report is in front of the FBAC committee now for their feedback. And it talks about several areas in a very broad perspective. I'm just trying to move there we go. So the first one we're going to look at is continuing education. And continuing education offers various programs, international languages, elementary, Afrocentric or African heritage, community programs, secondary credit courses, night, weekend, and summer. Offers summer programs and offers international student education and adult as a second language courses and adult day school credit programs. Currently, there's a projected shortfall to funding of $6.1 million in this area when we look at the funding for continuing education versus the cost of running our continuation program. So we're going to review the programs with our colleagues from continuing education and bring some ideas and recommendations how to reduce this shortfall. The next area we're going to look at is outdoor, and this is rather lengthy, but it speaks really to the program offerings we have in outdoor education with overnight trips and day trips that we provide. And this is taken right from the report, so you go on the website and pull it off if you'd like. But I'll just take you to the bottom part of this long paragraph. Excuse me. Outdoor education is about 7.2 million with a revenue from GSN of 2.1. And the collection of user fees of around $2 million leaves us approximately a 3.1 cost over funding and revenues. So again, we're going to work with our colleagues from outdoor education to see how we can address this deficit going forward. The other areas we're going to look at are major funding comes through the GSN. However, less than 10% of our overall revenues come from fees and services. So we're going to look at things such as permit fees. We're going to re-examine our interest rates with the most recent information on where we see the economy going and information we have from our bankers. We're going to look at the international student fees, and we're going to look at all the other fees to see if there's anything more we can squeeze out. But it really isn't a large area. But again, we're going to comb through it again one more time to see what we can do. The next area of focus is going to be around central staff. And as you are aware, if you've watched our budget process over the years, we've done several reductions in this area. Again, to keep the supports as close to school as possible. But again, we're going to look through that again to see if there's anything else we can do in this area. We're going to look at the replacement cost for staff absences. So again, as you've heard, probably with the pandemic, we're seeing a huge increase in staff's absences. So we're going to look at what we can do in this area to reduce those absences and thereby reduce our overall cost for replacement staff in our schools. We're also going to look at our facilities department. And in this area, there's two issues. There's our actual facilities grant, which is really for the caretaking, the maintenance, and the utilities in the department, and there's our renewal grant. And because of absenteeism and the inflation that's in the environment right now, we've seen an overage in our renewal grant of approximately $6 million that hits our operating grant as an offset. So again, we're going to work with Maya Pachetti and her team to look to see what we can do to curb our costs under our facilities area. And again, as you know, we have very old buildings and we haven't had an opportunity to close our buildings. So this is a particular challenge for us at TDSB. So again, we're going to look at areas where their funding exceeds what we spend, and we're going to look at those areas carefully to see what is fully implemented, what it meets the board's priorities, obligations, resolutions, and operations, and see where we can adjust services as needed. Things to consider as we do this work. The first one is the multi-year strategic plan, and as you know, we're going through a review of that now, and that's going to come to the board shortly. And in the report to PPC, the Planning and Priorities Committee, on January 22nd, as a public update number 3, there was two main focuses of our multi-year strategic plan as the bedrock, so to speak. One was our commitment to truth and reconciliation from the Commission of Canada for calls to action. And we also believe equity is a foundational in all our work. So those two are what I'll call our bedrock. There are 4 draft strategic directions that are outlined in the update. They're around belonging, achieving, thriving, and revitalization. And I would direct you to that report on January 22nd for more information. But the strategic plan is obviously one of our important guiding documents around how we plan for the future. The next one obviously is very simple. It's ministry regulations. We must be compliant with ministry regulations such as elementary class sizes. Obviously, our collective agreements, we have to be compliant with our collective agreements, so that's another area that we look at as we consider the options to balance the budget. The last one is around the Ministry of Education Student Achievement Plan, and there are 11 indicators under that school boards must report on. They're KPIs, for lack of a better term. And I didn't put them all in here for the concise presentation tonight, but they are available on the ministry's website if you'd like to look at them. So having said all that, what we're going to be working on and what the plan is, this is our updated scheduled meeting. So on February 14th, we're going to have the high-level potential areas of focus to balance the budget discussion, and the report is on our website that's going to the FPAC committee as well as the rest of the agenda for FPAC on the 14th. And it's going to be a chance for us to get some feedback from our trustees as we start working through this work. On February 20th to 22nd, we're going to have 2 webinars for our stakeholders, one at noon and one in the evening. And I believe it's the 20th is the evening and the 21st is a noon one. But we're also going to take an opportunity to check with our students through the Student Senate to make sure that we get their feedback as what we're planning impacts them. We're also, of course, during that week, going to be looking at doing a survey, and it'll be likely a very simple survey that'll talk about the areas of focus and asking people to give us their ranking of them into importance, and also an open area where they can put general comments in it, what they wish. The next FBEC meeting is March 4th, and two things will happen at that meeting. As normal, tradition in the board, our March 4th meeting will be where we do our school-based staffing for the year coming up and present to the trustees for their approval, and it goes to a March either 6th or 7th full board for approval. And we'll provide feedback from what we heard at the webinars, the consultation with the students, and the survey at the March 4th meeting. The next one is a new meeting we've added, and that's the March 19th FBEC meeting. And this is where details around the actual implementation of the options to balance will be presented to the Finance Budget Enrollment Committee. So that high level will now turn into concrete recommendations for the trustees consider, discuss, and provide further feedback to the staff. Following that, what was originally planned to be the March 26th FBEC, where the FBEC committee would recommend to board the options to balance, is now going to be a night for delegations from our communities, because we want to hear back from them when the detailed options are out there. We feel it's important for our trustees to hear back as well, and that will be that opportunity at that evening. March 27th was originally the plan for the board to pass the operating budget, will now be the official meeting where FBEC will make recommendations to board on passing the budget. April 2nd, the board will vote on the operating budget for 24-25, and then we're expecting sometime, hopefully in late April, that we'll see the grants for student needs come out, and either immediately with them or shortly thereafter, we'll get the actual technical documents that we can put data into to see what the financial position is. Last year they came out together. Some years they come out a week or two apart, but we're expecting something to come to us sometime to mid to late April. As I said previously, in our the date now, we haven't set the specific dates, but the capital budget will come in draft form to the trustees in May, FBEC. It's pretty straightforward. It's just pretty well transactional. And that budget will be approved at the June board meeting. And the previously approved operating budget combined would be entered into staff into the ministry's budget forms and submitted to the ministry for their June 30th deadline. I've left this resource here for you because I think it's important that you have these things. The financial facts for 22-23 is there. We're currently updating for the 23-24 information, and we hope to have that out in our March round of Finance and Budget Enrollment Committees. Again, I've given you a link to the board's website for budget where we put all our reports, the agendas coming up, and other information is available. And then, of course, I've given you a link to the boardroom area on the website where you can actually pull up the detailed reports for the FBEC committee and see them there. So, Mr. Chair, that's the end of my presentation this evening. I'm happy to take any questions from the committee they may have.
All right, we're going to, because we are behind, I'm going to suggest 1 minute for people. And Richard is going to start off because he's got the budget working group.
Okay, thank you. I'll be just 1 minute. Very quick, one of the reasons we asked Craig about the cost per program is we clearly realized in the working group that the special education budget, although it covers all of special education, there's one segment of that budget or one segment of special education that's very well defined in terms of its delivery, what the ministry requires in terms of classroom size, et cetera. So we asked Craig to break that out and see what that actual cost is. But there was 5 other models that Effie explained to us that exist in special education, or there's a total of 5, and there was the indirect resource support, withdrawal support, and partially integrated and fully self-contained. And so what we're trying to do is slice up the budget a little more, and I know it's not perfect, but to try and understand where the monies are for each of those parts of the programs, because as I've mentioned before, we have principals that have said to parents, I do not have support for your child, and we've asked, what does that mean? And does it mean you can't get support? We want to know what kind of monies are there for the various models. Thank you. And now Leo's turn.
Leo.
Thank you. Thanks, Craig. You mentioned all potential areas of funding cuts by name, except on slide 8, where it caught my attention. You call them additional areas of TDS budget where spending exceeds funding. The board always tells us, and we know, that special education spending exceeds funding, as it should, since the board has a legal duty to accommodate and a moral obligation to do so. But these slides make me very concerned, slide 8 specifically, because now I'm wondering if you're implicitly hinting that these additional areas are actually special education. Is this the unfortunate case? Is special education included under the additional areas euphemism? If so, please expand what you mean by the reductions of services in these areas could potentially result in a range of impacts. Thanks.
So thank you. And through the chair, we are, as I said in the presentation around what we're considering, one of the important things we're considering is the multi-year strategic plan and the ministry's achievement plan, as well as the regulations. So every effort will be made where humanly possible to keep impacts as far away from students as possible, including in special education. Can I guarantee that? No, until we get to the end of the process. But I would say that we're not looking to special education for significant changes, if any, but that's the best I can offer at this point in time.
All right, thank you very much, Craig. I want to move right from this, and thank you for coming in to present. You're more than welcome to stay if you like, or if you gotta go, you gotta go. Leanne, can you just help me out? I want to now move to the next agenda item, which is the motion I'm proposing on budget. I'm going to just ask you if you could put the text up, or if you could read it out, or both. Let me, as she's doing that, just explain why I'm proposing this, and I'm hoping that this is the kind of thing, if I read my CX right, that we all would pretty much instantly agree with. When Craig comes in and does his valiant job of trying to explain very complicated things, there's a blizzard of information, and I don't envy the trustees in when they have to make decisions on budget. But I think, given that we are to be consulted on the budget, it is important that we communicate a clear, loud, simple message, which is that there should be no cuts to supports or services or staffing for students with special education needs, period. And we don't need numbers for that. We don't need to understand all the details for that to be able to say that. We just need to say that. And my view is, if anyone should be saying it, it should be SEAC. Not only that, I think we would be putting wind in the sails of the Louise Sariscos and Andy Palmers and all the other great folks here who are trying to do the best for our kids by our conveying the message to trustees: don't cut funding for our kids. So Leanne, can you just read the motion out?
Sure. I've also posted it in the chat and I put it up on the screen. SEAG recommends to the TDSB trustees that the forthcoming TDSB budget should ensure that there are no cuts to services, supports, learning opportunities, or resources for students with special education needs. Those students require an increase to the services, supports, and staffing provided for them.
So, and you'll see that contrary to any motion I've ever written before, it's actually just 2 sentences or so, and it fits on way less than a page. And I did that on purpose because it's self-explanatory. We don't need whereases. They'll know what we mean. If I may, I'm going to move the motion, or if somebody wants to move it and then get a seconder and then see if there's discussion.
I can move it.
Leo moving the motion. Do we have a seconder? Nora Green seconded.
Anyone discussion? I'm hoping, given that we have other things, if people are just in agreement that we won't need to debate, but I do, of course, want to open it to if anybody has any concerns or objections or whatever.
Not seeing any hands on the screen at the moment, David, nor in the room.
All right, then shall we call the motion? All in favor? I don't vote because I'm the chair. Have you got it count?
Leanne's going to count.
I'm going to count, yeah.
I guess what I'll do is those in the room, don't use the screen. Those not in the room, please use the screen with your reaction.
Okay, thank you.
Leanne, tell me when you're okay.
Yeah, I'm just counting.
Time.
David will break a tie if it's needed.
Yes. Just for people to understand at home, the acoustics in this room and the speakers are not actually great because there's an echo. So if I'm not at some points picking up on or ask you to repeat something, which I think I did to Jean-Paul earlier, it's not you. It's the room and the speakers. And I apologize.
We all reflect that same sentiment, David, that it is hard to hear in here.
Trying to get the view up.
Right.
Two in the room.
Three in the room. Three in the room.
So
Do you want to know?
anybody who is on Zoom, if you could just not answer in the chat or anything, just put a hands up icon.
Use the reaction for the hand up icon.
Kristen has a check mark. Kristen Doyle.
Oh, okay, that's.
Oh, it disappeared.
6, 7, 8. So I have 8, 9. Sorry. I have 6. Sorry, I'm just counting out loud. I have 9, and I actually need 11 for the motion. David, I'm assuming your hand is up?
Yes, if I can vote, I'm voting.
You're voting, so that is 10, and we have 20 members in attendance, which means we need 11 to pass. So because it's so close, I'm going to just recount quickly.
Has everybody cast their vote in favor of the motion to request no cuts to special education as David has read it?
Sorry, I have 2 more hands that just came up, so that does bring us to 11. So that
Right.
does pass.
And don't forget, alternates don't vote. So they,
Correct, I have an alternate voting because she's
right.
replacing somebody tonight, because
right,
Stephen
that's fair.
had to actually leave the meeting early, so.
okay. So are we good?
We're good.
Okay, opposed? Do you want to count if opposed?
Everybody put their hands down now for the yes, and any opposed, put your hand up, please. Has everybody cast their vote here that are opposed?
You got it, Leanne?
I voted yes.
Well, we're looking to see who is voting opposed on the screen right now. If you're voting opposed, please raise your hand under the reactions. If you're not intending to have your hand raised for the vote, please take your hand down. So, right.
Oh, okay, okay, that's fine. Then we don't need to. All right, it passes. And I'm going to be away on March 4th, so
Main question.
Richard's not available, so I'm going to be asking Nora on behalf of the chair of SEAC to present this to the FBAC committee. Sorry, we have a question?
I thought there was a question, but the hand has gone down.
Okay, very good. We're catching up on time because we're doing efficiently. Let me suggest how I want to do this so that we continue to catch up on time. We're going to move to priorities now. I've allocated about a half an hour, but that may jam us at the other end. So if we don't, when about 25 minutes is up, if we haven't gotten to everybody, I'm going to pause it and just resume it where we left off at the March meeting.
Trustee Patel has his hand up.
Okay. Sorry, Trustee.
Trustee Patel, yes. Trustee Patel, you have your hand up?
No, Chair, it's by mistake, I think. It's from the previous one.
You're just stretching. Okay. So what I'm going to do is have Richard just call on people. If we could keep it to 2 minutes a person, I'm not going to be rigid, but just tell us your 2 or 3 top agenda items, agenda topics, categories of things you want us to deal with over the next 9 meetings. And if you want to add or you just agree with others, feel free. If you've only got 1 or if you've got 2, that's fine also. And you're always entitled to change your mind later. No one's locking this in. This is a straw poll or brainstorming. It's not a vote that binds anyone. It's not a vote at all. So Richard, if you want to.
And because I don't have full visibility to the list, I would say if people just want to go around the table and raise your hand, Are whoever ready to go
Can we
first?
just call on people going down from top to bottom, and if you don't want to speak, you're more than welcome
I
not.
can, but I think it may change, so
Yep.
do we try Sarah first? Sarah, sorry on the pronunciation of your name.
Yeah, it's Sarah Chibber. Can I ask to defer just
Sure,
for a moment? I'm just
absolutely.
having a
This
childcare
is,
issue.
Okay, Reese Macklin?
Hi there, Reese. This is Beth from Kadak, and this is Reese's first meeting as the Kadak alternate.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if Reese would be ready to
Okay.
say something quite yet.
That's okay. We can get back to you today or another time. That's fine, and welcome aboard.
Dana Chapman?
Yes,
Thank you
thank
so much.
you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, Richard, if it's okay, Reese and I, and this is Beth again, we will email you our priorities
That's fine
tonight
too.
after the meeting. Yeah,
Flip it to, send it to Leanne and she'll compile.
amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Going down the list, Dana Chapman? Okay, next, Jean-Paul? Next on the list, Katia Bulumbo?
That's staff.
Oh, staff, okay. Kirsten Doyle then, next.
Kristen's muted or?
Okay, didn't pop up. And it would help if people will include with their name their association with SEAC. All right, Marissa Hutchinson? Oh,
Oh,
okay.
I'd like to defer at this time.
Could you repeat, please?
You hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I said I'd like to defer at this time.
okay, sure.
Thank you.
Is Elizabeth Chalmers?
Staff.
Oh, sorry, okay. Diane Montgomery?
Hi there, it's Diane. Yeah, I'm with Inclusion Action Ontario, and I'm the alternates. I'm sure Laura will have more to talk about, but I know one of the big priorities for our group is exclusions, the area of exclusions, and also I think just more of an update on things like the number of like the progress of segregated classes versus inclusive classes and how the board is doing in that area. And yeah, so just where that is and how it's going, I guess. Those would be my two things I can
All
think
right,
of.
no,
off
that's
the top.
helpful. When I joined SEAC, I think the numbers at TDSB were like 50% of students with special education needs were in segregated or congregated programs. The aim back then was to try to move more in the direction of inclusion. It would be helpful as part of that discussion when staff are in a position to know what those numbers look like now. If they,
Yeah, because it's been a while, and so I think it would be
Right.
great to see where we're at.
of course. Great, Diane, thank you.
Tracy O'Regan?
Hi there. Thanks, Richard. I think for me and community living in Toronto, I think there's two priorities. One, thank you for saying it, Diane. Yeah, we would need to discuss about exclusions, and to Nora's point that she made a few meetings ago, when families are being asked to pick up their children and their children are leaving schools early, how is that marked in attendance? That's something I'd like to have more discussion on. And I'd really like more discussion on how supports are allocated to the regular classrooms for students that require support. Again, a lot of families are suggesting that principals are saying there are no supports. So I'd like to know how supports are allocated per school and how supports are allocated per regular classroom.
You know, that's good. And if we actually can generalize a bit from that, and I'm listening, but let's just take that scenario where a family asks the principal and the principal said, I'd like to do that, but we don't have the staff. It will be helpful when we get to that topic for the staff here to be able to tell us kind of what's the back end, what's gone on at the other end, both to where how they're allocated, but also what options does the principal actually have? Not to be answered tonight, but this is a topic we'll want to come back to. Thanks so much.
Bronwyn?
Are you muted, Bronwyn?
Bronwyn, we're just calling on you for.
Yes, sorry, I had childcare issues myself. Yes, I want to agree. Definitely, the refusal of admittance is a big topic that I think still needs to be addressed. The concerns that there's still, again, is no tracking from the principals on how many times this is happening. There's no documentation, as well as the complaints that are repeatedly gone to the superintendent. Repeatedly, in my own personal experience and families that I work with, nothing is documented, especially when there's new superintendents and they transfer or one leaves. There is no documentation that has been transferred. It is too easy to this constantly happen to families and no one is documenting it. And the other thing is that privileged families are really the only ones who I have seen that have success. I have a family that I've worked with. They have hired a parent advocate who goes to these meetings. Their child was diagnosed last year on the spectrum, also with hearing loss, and they have to go through these meetings with emotional support to advocate for them, and they have the money to pay for it. What is happening with all these families that don't even know what this process is? English is not their first language. It is too many families where privilege is not even existence are just falling through the cracks, and it's unacceptable. So I'd like to see the TDSB really look through the lens of how we invest so much into diversity, equity, and inclusion, but those families are truly the ones who have no idea what's happening to their child, and the privileged are the ones who can fight and advocate, and it's wrong. So I'd like to have this really addressed, please.
Thank you, Bronwyn.
Excellent.
Stephanie?
I'd like to defer at this time.
Sure.
Okay. Eliza? Eliza, did you have any?
Eliza put in the chat that she has bedtime issues, so she'd like to email hers in.
Okay.
please.
Oh, okay, great.
Jordan Glass?
I'm here. Just had to take a moment to unmute there. Yeah, I have a few questions. On my mind are issues surrounding transportation, readiness and training of drivers, as well as the matter of on the ground and in classroom supports, numbers of teachers and support staff, and also the rate of teacher absences as a reflection of potential burnout.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I've just lost my screen here partly. I think we have Beth next.
Hi there. Reese and I from CADAC are compiling a list, and we will email you at the end of the meeting.
That's fantastic.
Yep, thank you. Thanks.
Liban? Hassan? Oh, sorry. Okay. Andrea Roach?
Staff.
Staff. I know Allison Board is staff. And so let's go to Nora. I don't see any other ones on the list there. And then myself.
You have Michelle?
I don't know where Michelle. Michelle, are you still on here?
Oh,
Oh.
no, Melissa.
Melissa.
Yeah,
okay, Melissa's back.
sorry, I'm still here.
Okay. So anybody that I've missed, kind of like, let's jump in because the screen keeps changing, so I can't keep going back and forth.
Feel free to just unmute and say your name if you'd like to.
I see Melissa's unmuted now, so let's do her before we come back to the room.
Yeah, to save time, I'll defer and email it in. I'm curious to hear what other people are saying, so thank you.
Okay. Anybody else online? I think Michelle.
Hi, so priorities for the coming year.
Yes.
I believe staff had the exclusions piece that we were still exploring. And I think that's important for the committee to keep going with. Yeah, that was the really big one for me.
Okay, is there anybody else online that we have missed?
Trustee Patel, Chair, I'll defer and I'll send the email to you or vice versa.
Sorry, Trustee Patel, can you?
You'll email.
Oh, you'll email. Okay, perfect. I got it there now. All right. Anybody else online before we go to the room?
Isabella LC4.
Thank you.
I would like to defer at this point.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else online? Okay, Nora.
Thanks. So Diane mentioned refusal to admit or exclusions, both a priority for us at Inclusion Action Ontario. The other thing I would like to look at is inconsistent delivery of accommodation and the duty to accommodate. So that would be another area of concern. Another area of concern of ours would be system education, and I know the department's working very hard on providing system learning to everyone, but I'm hearing tonight trustees would benefit from that as well. So ongoing system learning about disabilities, exceptionalities, how to teach students, given their unique profiles, so professional learning to the system, and how to universally design and differentiate. And then lastly, I'm very interested in outcomes for students. So there are many students that we only hear about graduation rates. We hear nothing about students who don't graduate. I want outcome data for students, all students, not some students, all students.
Thank you. Leo.
Thanks. I think number one agrees with what many people said here, refusal to admit and school exclusions, both hard and soft, which impacts autistic students disproportionately, violating rights and hindering educational and social development. In second place, I would say individualized support. So ensuring the educational system accommodates the unique needs of autistic students through truly personalized IEPs, which we see that are not necessarily the case today. Lots of work to do on IEPs. And a flexible curriculum that includes best practices and maintains continuity in learning. Third, I would say parental involvement. So improving parental involvement in all cases. And just an example is what we discussed today, the IPRC process, make it less bureaucratic, more inclusive of parental input, right? Letting parents really collaborate, but it transcends the IPRC. It's the parental involvement overall as a key priority. The next one I would say is parental advocacy education. So we speak to a lot of parents, and we're always very upset to see how some of them are not able to access the information, right? And that's definitely a mistake on the part of the board, something that's lacking. There has to be something to enhance the accessibility and understanding of information regarding parental rights and advocacy, especially for families facing language barriers and socioeconomic challenges, to empower them to actually advocate for their children effectively. So a lot of the work that we're doing in the K through 12 working group. And lastly, I would say educator training. So this agrees with what some other people said, supporting continuous training and development of teachers, administrators, assistants, everyone, to ensure consistent, high-quality education, leading to better academic and social outcomes, to echo the word that Nora used, which I think is important. So thank you.
Thank you, Leo. I'm going to go next then, and then let David finish off on that. And again, I don't want to kind of continue to rehash the one concern that I have that I see most often from families in the community that I represent, but I'm wondering if there's any way that when a principal, teacher, or any staff makes a direction that, okay, we don't have the support or we don't have funding, if they could just simply jot that down on a piece of paper, just so we know what they're saying, so parents can take that with them, just, have this local school, whatever the school name is, the person making that diagnosis, directive, et cetera, and just state on a piece of paper, they don't have the support at their school, name the school, or they don't have funding, or whatever the reason is, why they would refer a child to an IPRC or to a SEPRC, because I continue to hear families in my community being told right away, go to a SEPRC, and I know their children do not have complex medical needs, but they keep being referred there. So I think it would just be a simple note on the principal's part, or anybody's part, why they're recommending this. Just make it clear to the parents, and then at least the parents have some sort of documentation. There's no confusion, no miscommunication, no misunderstanding, no misinterpretation. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody's contributions, I want to say thank you for. It's going to really help us, and my goal is that, and Richard's goal is that we will draw heavily on what you're saying and what you'll email in. And if your views change over time, it's not locked down in time. For me, I'm going to add just a couple. One is I would like us to spend some time as a priority on low incidence disabilities. I'm here on behalf of parents of children with vision loss, whose numbers are tiny. We have kids with hearing loss, whose numbers are relatively tiny compared to a number of other disabilities, and if students with special education needs are kind of an underclass in the education system, parents of kids with low incidence disabilities find they're swimming even more upstream, even though it doesn't seem like it could be any harder than what everybody else faces. So I'd like to spend a bit of time, if we are able to, and if it works, focusing a bit on that. I want to focus very much on what we've talked about in the K-12 working group, more of which will be coming up in terms of the parents' right to know, letting parents know what's available, and exploring the idea of systems navigators, since this is a very hard system to navigate. There are good people working in it, but it's hard finding your way. So with all of that, Leanne is going to do her usual heroic job of synthesizing this, but we'll also take your further feedback, and thank you for that. Let me now move to our next budget, or our next agenda topic, which is the leadership report. We are tight on time, and so I'm going to ask staff if we've got your report, we've read it. So if you can just give us a 2-minute summary, and then, or if there's anything you want to add, because it's quite clear and well expressed, and then we could go to questions. Is it Louise or Nandy?
Thanks, David. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I understand that SEAC has the leadership report, but we need to be cognizant that there are members of the public that join these meetings that don't have it right away. So I'll go as quickly as I can. There are a number of items in the leadership report. I'm really pleased to share with SEAC that our entire special education and inclusion department has been studying the book Ableism in Education, which really looks at how we shift mindsets about how we teach and how we approach students with special education needs. And this book is really helpful for us to use research and use data to inform decisions that we make with regards to special education programs, services, and supports. And I really do encourage SEAC members to take a listen or a look at this book, if possible. We were very pleased to host the C conference for a number of boards across the TDSB, across the GTA that joined us at the Microsoft office. And the keynote speaker, again, of interest to SEAC, I'm sure, was around accessibility and the use of AI, artificial intelligence, to enhance accessibility. So lots of new learning there. As per the PAC on SEAC calendar, we were to report on special incidents portion funding, or SIP portion funding. Please note that this year the ministry has changed its approach. In the 23-24 school year, the ministry is undertaking a review and therefore using a formula to calculate the amount of money for SIP funds for school boards instead of using the number of student applications. So in 22-23, the board received 13 million roughly for SIP claims, and in 23-24, we will be receiving roughly 15 million, which is the 22-23 amount plus 5% increase as per the ministry formula. There is data on projected enrollment that has been shared with SEAC as well in the leadership report. And again, this is a PAC on SEAC item for the month of February. And we will see that there is a slight increase in projections, that is, increase in numbers that is projected. And we've also linked for you the projections enrollment report that was submitted to trustees, if you'd like a more detailed look at that. And that is the projected enrollment increase is being attributed to newcomer numbers in Canada. February is Inclusive Education Month. We have shared this with staff at all levels through a number of mediums. And of course, as always, we have the IPRC data as well as the psychological assessment data for the month of February and also cumulative. David, I hope that was fast enough. Thank you.
That's fantastic. If we want to go to questions, I'm going to ask if you could try to keep within a minute. If you can't, try to get as close as you can.
Okay, on the speakers list, I have myself and Jean-Paul. I'm going to go first. So a question, is the book Ableism in Education, Rethinking School Practices and Policies, was that provided to each teacher out there, copies of, and can SEAC obtain copies? That'll be my first question.
So thank you for the question, Jean-Paul. It was actually provided to each member of the Special Education and Inclusion Department. So not teachers in schools, but this is the book that we're using as a department. And certainly we can get SEAC a copy of that.
Okay, and the last item on the presentation, the department will continue to use this research to inform decisions about special education program services and supports. At some point coming back, can you give us some idea of where actually an application has occurred and how it has benefited the special education program and special education students or students with special education needs? And in terms of the SIP funding, that increase in funding sounds positive. Have you looked at what the impact is on the budget discussions? I'm assuming positive, but if not, advise, if you would. And psychological assessments. Do we have a projected impact on the special education budget of those assessments that are completed, in progress, and waiting, how those will be projected going forward to impact it or not impact it?
Sorry, I'm just trying to remember all the questions, Richard. Maybe we could do this one question at a time because I
Sure.
do need processing time
Okay,
myself.
yeah. Special incidents funding, you're getting more money next year. Is that sufficient to cover the needs?
So in terms of funding, what we're hoping for and what we, like SEAC, staff like SEAC have advocated for is no reductions or cuts, if you will, to special education staffing for next year. And we're hoping that that SIP funding will be able to allow for us not to have any of that. So we are viewing it in that sense as in a positive way.
And it's sufficient to meet the needs?
In terms of projected needs, we should be able to meet the needs based on the staffing allocation that we have this year. Of course, everyone always thinks that there could be more benefits if we had more.
And the last one was on the psychological assessments, what we know are completed, in progress, and waiting. How are we able to project forward what the impact on the budget might be for those that are in progress? Do we kind of have an idea where those are going to fall? And the waiting ones, obviously, very early on, but how do we basically plan ahead and say, okay, we think the impact from these will be this and we need more funding?
So again, we're looking at, as per Regulation 18198, always looking at regular class with support for students before looking at ISPs, because we know that the staffing budget goes to ISPs. That really does take up quite a bit of the budget. And in terms of projecting, we project with the students that we currently have, knowing that some students will graduate, some students will also leave the TDSB. However, as student needs arise, we do have a holdback, Richard, which Craig has explained to SEAC before, which we use to provide staffing throughout the school year.
Thank you.
All right, we got two other speakers.
Jean-Paul, and then we have Nora.
And then that'll be it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Richard, to you, Mr. Chair, and to Nandi. Thanks for, the update on, some of the education learning activity that happened. For the AI and accessibility, how AI can be used to improve accessibility. Can you please elaborate a little bit on your takeaway from that learning and how is now being or will be implemented at TDSB to improve accessibility? We know that we have really some concern and even issue with accessibility towards TDSB.
Thanks for the question. So I'll be really quick. speaker that was there that was speaking about AI and accessibility was talking about what Microsoft in particular was doing around accessibility using artificial intelligence. We are not at that point as yet where we are implementing artificial intelligence in terms of accessibility. We do have technology that we're using through assistive technology and through C-claims, for example, to support students accessing learning. However, specifically with artificial intelligence, this was very exciting for us because it was the first time that we were introduced to this. So we will be continuing to work with Microsoft and with other school boards to see how we can use AI to enhance or improve what we're currently doing with regards to technology and accessibility.
Nora?
Thanks. I guess I have two questions. One was at the end of the doc, it talks about Inclusive Education Month, and there are 3 resources there that say for following links and for more information. Are those resources staff have now seen? So in the leadership report, it says Community Living Ontario resources, the evolution towards inclusive, and do children have rights, the harmful effects of partial school attendance and seclusion rooms webinar. So I'm just curious with that, and then I have a second question.
Sure, thank you. So we took the information right from the Inclusive Action, I believe it's called. I can find out the exact website, Nora, but the website that actually shares this information with us, and they had those links there.
But did staff see it, is my question. It's like,
Yeah,
is
so
it-
we
are
shared this
being
with
out-
staff.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, so that's what I said earlier in the leadership report. We shared this with staff at all levels through a number of mediums.
Okay, I got that about the book, not about those resources.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. And then my second question is more of a general question about tonight we gave feedback about a policy and a procedure. And to be honest, that's probably my 4th one now this month of giving feedback for things. So I've done the community agent advisory committee procedure. I've done this procedure. I've talked about budget. We talked about a multi-year strategic plan, and this is all in the last month. And so I guess what I'm curious about is, A, sometimes I'm being asked for feedback and I'm not given the actual original document. And when I get the original document, the slide deck staff gave me did not highlight concerns I definitely had once I read the actual procedures. So when I looked at the slide deck, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I look at the procedure, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That's not what I got out of the slide deck. So I'd like to know going forward, are we going to actually get what trustees are going to read when people ask us for feedback? And then I guess secondly, what happens to our feedback and how do trustees get it? So because I feel like I'm giving a lot and it's actually hours of time, which I know you guys agree because your staff is coming to all of this. How is it documented? How is it recorded? How would the public know what I've said to you about all these things? So you just said David had to listen to you read the report tonight. Because the public didn't know it, but yet I'm giving all this feedback. So how will the public know? Thank you, Richard, sorry. How will the public know what I've said all these things that they were not part of?
So Nora, your questions about the presentation as opposed to what I've shared in my leadership report, but I'll answer it anyway. As we shared in the special education appeal procedure presentation tonight, your feedback will be part of what we're taking back in the second report to GPC. So we shared that we went to GPC, we shared the feedback we received from trustees at GPC with SEAC tonight, and we're going to incorporate now SEAC's feedback when we go back to GPC.
And if like tonight, people didn't agree with our feedback, will
Nora,
they see our concerns is my question.
So we take any feedback we receive, since SEAC is an advisory committee to the TDSB, we take your feedback under advisement, and that feedback, and however or whichever way we take it, will be included in the report back to GPC.
Okay, so trustees don't hear, got it.
All right. Thank you very much for everyone's question. And Andy, as always, thanks for the content and the effort. I'm going to change up the sequence a little because I'm mindful of time and priorities among priorities. I'm going to move up working group reports. Richard already did budget. I am not going to do anything for K-12. So the question is, Melissa, is there anything you need to report verbally from the special education plan working group? Just give you a second to unmute because I totally caught you out of sequence.
Yep, thank you very much. So I can be brief. There's two parts to the update. One is we sent an email to Leanne that was included in the material budget, basically saying Nandy and others want to wind this up earlier this year. So they want us to close off our feedback. The door is basically closed, but if anybody has anything urgent, I guess send it to us ASAP. The second thing is our group has been working extensively all year. We take the feedback, we really try to work through it and digest it and put it in a usable format and refer it specifically to parts of the plan. We're just about finished that document. We had hoped to finish it by this meeting, but we are all volunteers who are very busy. So we should have the final document to be sent out. We'll give it to Leanne to send to all of you. If you could watch for it, please try to turn it around within a week. If you have anything, that really jumps out at you, please tell us ASAP. Otherwise, that is the document that goes to Nandy, and then Nandy works on it with staff. You can correct me, Nandy, if I'm garbling this. But basically, she works on it, and in a couple of months, she'll come back with her response on, thanks for the feedback. We accepted this part. We didn't accept this part, and this is why, and so on. Then that gets rolled into the special education plan for next year, like for starting in September, which eventually gets submitted to the ministry by July 31, and then that's the document people work with next year. One other footnote is if anybody has any feedback after, let's say, February, you can still send it in. We're going to keep it and put it into the following year's collection of feedback. So keep that feedback coming. Thanks.
All right, and thank you, Melissa and your group for being on top of this. It's not easy and it's important. Trustees report, anything we need to hear aloud, or have we got everything in writing that we need? Any trustees feel they need to do a report?
I forwarded a document to Leanne, and that can be shared with the committee, and it's some board updates and some things that for parents, like surveys and registrations that are coming up. And if you have any questions, please just reach out or email one of us. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Association reports. We've got a very good written report from the Ontario Autism Coalition.
Jean-Paul has his hand up.
Oh, Jean-Paul?
Thank you. I was just wondering if we have, we already reviewed a list or a working group for this year, active working group for this year.
Because the priority working group didn't actually meet last time, we're basically going forward on the process that we're doing the feedback from the group as a whole, which we've been doing, and then Richard and I will work on and ongoing feedback from everybody. And we've got the feedback that was sent to us last fall, as I mentioned in writing, from those who sent it into staff. So we're going to be, basically it'll be reflected in the way we set agendas, which is why it's good to keep the feedback coming.
Tracy and then Leo.
No, sorry, David. I was not talking about specifically about the priority working group. I'm asking if we will have to review the active list, the list of active working group for the year, because we did that last year or previously. To know that
you know what? Let me take that back and let's see if we can deal with it between now and the next meeting. It's a good question. Let me take it back.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So we have Tracy and then Leo.
Thank you, Richard. I just wanted to thank Nandy for including that it is Inclusive Education Month, which was started from the community living movement across Canada. The resource I think you're talking about, Nandy, is Inclusive Education Canada, which is in part of Inclusion Canada. And I just want everyone to be aware and check out Community Living Toronto socials. There's going to be some great videos coming out promoting inclusive education and why it's a great choice. Thanks so much.
Very good. We're into association reports.
Oh, Leo, you have a
Leo.
question?
Yeah.
No, for association reports.
Nope. Okay. Anybody else, or can we get to our other business?
Leo has a question.
Oh, sorry.
No, mine is for association reports. I want to make a comment for association reports. 30 seconds is all I need.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks, David. I just want to say World Autism.
You can have 40.
Thank you. I'll take 10. World Autism Day is on April 2nd, 2024, and we're just inviting schools to join the Celebrate the Spectrum School Giving Challenge and or fly our flag during the month of April or on April 2nd. We have toolkits available for the teachers with activities, videos, classroom discussions, all that stuff, and resources to engage students. This is an invitation to make our schools more inclusive and break the stigma. If staff, and this I'm directly asking Nandi and all the folks here, if you can help us spread the word across school through your internal newsletters, that would be great. There's a website, celebratethespectrum.com. And yeah, I'll send it to you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great. And I'll just do one for the Down Syndrome Association. Next month is March, third month of the year, and on the 21st is World Down Syndrome Day, coinciding with 321, which is basically about the 3 chromosomes on the 21st pair, which is the genetic diagnosis for Down syndrome. That'll be celebrated next month. Thank you.
Very cool. All right. Other business, community, the TDSB proposed procedure or policy regarding community advisory committees and SEAC. Let me summarize a few things, and I'm going to gamble if people are agreeable, we could do this and not need to extend time. But if we need to, we will. So, in a nutshell, we found out in late February that the board has a text of a proposed procedure or protocol or policy or both regarding community accessibility, I keep saying the wrong word, community advisory committees, of which there are several. A couple of them are statutory, like ours. It totals about almost 30 pages of dense reading. I have read it all. A number of you have too. A number of people expressed serious concerns in writing. I've read it all. I wrote some of it too. Let me say, and the objections all boil down to 2 points. One, we were not given a fair opportunity for input and were given really excessively tight timelines that we weren't able to meet. And particularly when we are volunteers and it's regarding our own function, we should get more. And second, there were several serious concerns about the, I'm going to put it in summary terms, the number of impositions that it appeared to be imposing. And one idea for dealing with this, which came from Melissa, was a possible motion. I have another solution, which I think will address our needs. Let me suggest it, and let's see where we stand. Number one, I believe from everything I've seen that there is strong consensus of the fact that there are these concerns. I didn't see anyone going, no, this all looks good. Number two, my own read of those documents is that they don't restrain us from doing exactly what we're doing as we're doing it, and will continue to do it. The regulations that create us prevail over any board policy, and the policy confirms that, but it doesn't have to. It's the case no matter what. The one thing that does affect us is a suggestion regarding terms of reference. We have terms of reference. It would be potentially helpful for us to look them over, and I've told staff that I'm proposing that in June meeting, we set up a terms of reference working group, get any thoughts the staff have from us, collect up from our membership of this committee and see if we need any changes, and if so, what they are. We can ponder that over the summer and deal with it in the fall. We don't need to deal with it now in order to comply with that policy or procedure. In fact, it sets no deadlines at all, as I understand. But beyond that, whatever I read in there, as far as I'm concerned, as your chair, I don't see it as restricting us. However, nevertheless, there are legitimate concerns at this table that have been expressed. And rather than doing a motion, which would go, for one thing, we'd have to work on the wording, and it would then go to a committee, which would then go to the whole trustees, probably well after they are scheduled to deal with this. The alternative I want to suggest is that as your chair, I write a letter to the board simply summarizing those two concerns. And what I propose to do is to write it in the next few days, quickly, circulate a draft to all of you, get people to weigh in. We don't want to wordsmith by committee by email because it would go on forever, but people say either they have strong concerns about what I said or there's a point that is absolutely setting them on fire that they really want in there, let me know, and then I will get it out. And I will write it in my name, in my capacity as the chair of the Special Education Advisory Committee. That will have the following advantages. Number one, I will send it immediately. Number two, it doesn't have to wait any board subcommittees. And number three, it'll get the point across. And the content I would draw on is exactly what people have shared in their emails, which has been accumulated for me and which is well written from you and very clear and consistent from one of you to the next. So it's not like there are divisions. So my suggestion, and Melissa, I know you wanted to propose a motion. I think this is a quicker and easier way of doing things. It will get it will be faster, it will be efficient, and it will convey the same message. So I guess my question is whether people are comfortable with that, and I'll let Richard take speakers.
We're at 9:03, David.
We're at 9:03. Can we have a motion to extend for 10 minutes?
Nora? Leo, second. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed to extending 10 minutes?
All right.
I see Melissa's hand up.
Let's start with Melissa because she's the one who asked for this to be on the agenda.
Yeah, so thank you so much, David, for raising this. I will just say for the full group, as we're working out process here, I did raise a request to have a motion on this agenda a few weeks ago, sent it to all the proper people a few different times, and I think it fell between the cracks, which I completely understand.
It absolutely did. I apologize for that.
Yeah, so it's not that I'm married to the motion. Here are my concerns, being very concise about it. One is there was actually about 50 pages, David, and I did go through the 36 pages of procedures with a legal, but also with 10 years of experience perspective, and had significant concerns about some of the things that were dropped in there that I don't think most people are aware of. So overall, if I was, excuse my language, but if I was to characterize it, it does seem to overall be reducing the autonomy, independent functioning, independent voices, self-governing aspects, ability to be heard both by trustees, by the public, and so on, of CACs. And I think that's significant. So there were general concerns that fed into that. There were also specific concerns, for example, that a single TDSB staff member assigned to each CAC could unilaterally, without any interim process and without any right of appeal, suspend a volunteer on a CAC for some deemed offense. And I suggested constructive fixes for things like that there should be things like a process that people understand what are the policies that govern CACs. And then just as we absolutely must do with all the children in our school, we don't just throw them out of school the first time they might have crossed over a line. We have, conversation and reconciliation and sometimes mediation and all of that stuff. And we have processes, and we want to be working fairly with everyone to have their contribution in a way that's relevant to the very, very diverse people who so kindly and generously volunteer for all of our CACs. So I think that there's a lot of specific concerns which could be summarized. So I guess, David, on your suggestion of you writing a letter, I'm completely fine with that. I guess I would just say that maybe for a few of us who've really been in the weeds, if we could be contributing to your letter in the sense that I think the two general concerns you laid out are very high level, but there are specific concerns, I think, about how things are raised. So, and the other thing I would just say is there hasn't really been a chance for us to consult with each other or for us to consult with other CACs, which I know is going to go into your report. But I've heard some talk that we can just keep going ahead as we want without worrying about how this impacts on us. But I'm not actually sure that that's how it works. In fact, I specifically think it doesn't. So I think that the process, if procedures are passed, whether we had input or not, at some point we're going to be told that we have to follow them. So I'd be very happy to figure out ways that we can work on this. And I'm happy to work with you on it, David, and I appreciate your leadership on it. Maybe we could take it offline with whoever's interested.
Chair Lepofsky, it's Louise. My hand is raised.
Yep.
Thanks. I just want to provide reassurance through you to Melissa. Melissa, 6.4.6. So members are elected or appointed for a 2-year term, except SEAC and PIAC. See Reg 61200, 46497 of the Act, as specified by the CAC approved election appointment process, and continue to serve until their successors are appointed or elected. So I think the team was trying to read the legislation, and where SEAC was unique, it was specified. And then to David's point, in the first document, 6.2.3, the legislation prevails always. Thank you.
Yep.
I hope it helps.
So I'm Melissa being, thank you, Melissa, for your feedback, and Louise, thank you for that clarification. Given that and given the hour, let me do some writing. Let me share it around. I want to share it with everybody, and of course there are some who are more eager to contribute on this, and they can, and I'm going to try to do it in an expeditious thing so we get it in time. And of course this does not limit Melissa or anybody else who's got more detailed concerns from sharing them with in more detail than are what in the letter, for sharing those with Leanne to be forwarded to the appropriate staff. So if we're good with that, and we have no other speakers, can I invite a motion to adjourn?
Wait.
One comment off the
Sorry,
chat.
One new item on other business, very
sure.
short. I just wanted to follow up. I had sent around a survey maybe about a month ago, saying that we at SEAC seem to be the poor cousins of people who hold meetings at 50-50 Young, in that all the trustees and PIAC do provide some light dinner refreshment for people who are rushing from their day jobs to kindly volunteer their time for these community meetings, or at least for PIAC and SEAC. I don't know about the other CACs. And I was told that it's very feasible to do that. It's just a phone call to a caterer when you know what the volume is. So we did receive a number of responses. I didn't follow up because I didn't want to fill everybody's in basket, but I think there was at least 8, maybe 8 to 10, and only one of those was negative. Nobody provided any comments. So I hope that might be something that you might consider for the next meeting. You know, by the way, for everybody, we used to do all of this before the pandemic. It sort of dropped off when we came back after the pandemic. And I think it would be a good idea to revive, because it really is helpful and important, and also more gratifying when we can connect in person as real people. We make friendships, we understand each other better, and we certainly learn a lot more, because there's a lot to learn.
Okay,
So,
Melissa, we will treat that in the minutes as officially under food for thought. Or gastronomic advocacy.
One other point from the chat, David.
Yes.
John Paul has noted that it is Black History Month in February, and I know we don't fully monitor the chat, but I wanted to make sure that was brought forward.
Thank you, Jean Paul. Thank you, everybody. Could we have a motion to adjourn, please? Please.
Leo, motion
I'll do
to
it.
adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. All opposed, stay in the room till next month. Everybody have a good end of February.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, thanks.
Thank you.
We serve breakfast by the way. Okay, I have to.